right. Hi, everyone. First of all, a very, very happy new year and a welcome to our first Leap webinar of 2026. A warm welcome to our session today, Resource Management Lessons Learned to Take into 2026. I'm Nora, your host for today's session. I work as a transformation consultant, helping teams design better ways of working, ones that are purposeful, flexible, and actually make sense for the people doing the work. We would like to kick off this special session, kicking off the new year, with a little bit of a warm up for you. So just take a brief moment and check in with yourself. What is one word that sums up your year, your 2025, in a good way? Doesn't need to be fancy, just the first idea, impulse that comes up. Please share it with us in the chat so we can get warmed up, we can get a sense for who's here with us, and we can get a sense for how your past year has been. And just make sure to send to everyone when you share your message. Let's see what we've got. Wow, we've got Angie saying her year 2025 can be summed up as blessed. We've got Gary, reflective, beautiful. Irene, evolution. That's awesome. We've got Edson, growth, very similar to Irene. And Molly, capital letters, busy. Nice. Awesome. Feel free to keep them coming if something else pops up. Thank you so much for warming up. So I'll stop sharing my screen and warmly invite you to the session. This is a webinar as part of Run's Leap webinar series, where we spotlight bold ideas, authentic experiences, and practical strategies shaping the future of resource management. So the conversation today, like any conversation we have as part of our program, is really focused on being real, authentic, and sharing from a place of experience and heart. And this webinar program is brought to you by Run. Run is purpose-built to make capacity and resource planning smarter, faster, and more human. In our session today, we'll use the last about 15 minutes for any questions from you. So as you follow along our conversation, as we dive into all the valuable learnings of the past year, think about your own questions, your own reflections, and please share them with us so that we can tackle them. We want this to be as valuable to you as possible. And there's a specific section here in Zoom webinar where you can capture your questions. Also, you can use the chat. Thank you so much for those of you who have still shared some words like change and authentic. Thank you. And let's use this chat to share any reflections, any thoughts, anything that resonates. You can also use the reactions here in Zoom to make it a lively webinar. We really love to hear from you and know you're there. And next up, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our wonderful speakers today. First up, Jen Wong is the Resource Operations Lead at Zorin and also a member of the Resource Management Executive Forum for organizations in public accounting. Jen brings more than a decade of experience in both building and scaling resource management across diverse territory like assurance, tax, advisory, and client accounting services. One of the biggest shifts for Jen this past year came at the start of 2025 when 13 companies, including the company she used to work for, came together to form a new national firm called Zorin. So that journey has given her a unique first-hand perspective on scaling resource management through major organizational change. Jen, it's a pleasure to welcome you to our Leap stage. Welcome.
Thank you. That was a very nice intro. I'm super excited
Aw.
to be here.
Awesome. And together with Jen, it's my pleasure to introduce our second panelist, Gary Ward. He serves as the head of outsourced professional services at Muse, a cloud-native hospitality software as a service platform. Gary has over 20 years of experience in business operations, process efficiency, and resource management, and so much more, honestly, plus his role on the advisory board of the Resource Management Institute. And also, Gary experienced a major transition this past year. After more than 9 years at Guidewire Software, building and leading global resource staffing, he also embarked on a new adventure in June mid last year, stepping into an entirely new role and journey. So that's awesome. We can't wait to hear more about that. And a special note to you, Gary. You're officially making Leap history once more as the first speaker to join us 4 times. And we're so incredibly grateful for your continued partnership and insights. So, Gary, also a warm welcome. Thank you for joining us once more.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
And I can see many hearts flying around. So, there's a lot of appreciation also from our audience. I can feel it. Perfect. Without further ado, let's dive right into 2025 and all the valuable nuggets, learnings, experiences, especially with both of you having had some major shifts in your world of work. So let's kick off by looking back. Let's take a step back. Let's look at 2025 and let's dive into the patterns and shifts that stood out to you the most looking back in the space of resource management. And perhaps, Jen, you can kick us off. What really stood out to you this past year?
Yeah. So I think in 2025, the biggest shift I noticed was that resource management started getting like more consistent attention at the leadership level. I would say like obviously not everywhere, not all at once, but there's more willingness to treat resource management as something that impacts outcome and not just like staffing logistics, which I feel like was a big shift. And the second one was definitely like scope, which kind of comes in line with the whole leadership level. The conversation I feel like in resource management has moved kind of beyond who is available into more of like skills, risk, supply and demand problem capacity. So when new work comes in, it's not really more so can we staff it? It's if we have the right people, do we have the right skill sets? And what kind of like what is our plan if we don't? So it's really coming into more of a strategic role, I feel overall scheme of things. And then I feel like for lastly, it's really just utilization is not everything anymore. It's really about um how to connect the decisions, I think, to stay like to track what leadership track. So whether that's revenue margin, whether that's delivery risk, client outcomes, and even like talent sustainability, I think is a big one. 2025 definitely felt like that has been a really big push besides the utilization numbers.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, just Excel doesn't always scale as much, but obviously we also use Excel at some point capacity. But just we need the visibility to make all these tiered decisions. So I think overall these are kind of what I've seen in 2025.
Amazing. Thank you so much for kicking us off. And I can't wait to hear from you, Gary. I think a lot of that resonates. What would you double click on? What would you add on top?
Yeah, no, I loved what Jen mentioned. I think and it's so funny, the Excel piece, right? I can't wait to hear from someone who is actually not using Excel at all. That would be an amazing win for resource management, I think, overall. Yeah, look, it resonates. I think a lot of this is kind of like going beyond either the parameters of the role or the job description, or maybe more importantly, beyond the perceived parameters of the role or job description, right?
Hmm.
Because that's kind of outward facing and inward facing. There's kind of a reflective piece to that, which is why I had the word reflective. But those who kind of tend to excel in resource management or have excelled in resource management go beyond the, I suppose, conversation of strategy and simply just are strategic, right?
Mhm.
And to Jen's point, in what areas, like that true kind of talent supply chain thinking, right? So the skills proficiency management, preparing the organization for what's coming, right?
Mhm.
Rather than where we are today.
Mhm.
Looking to engagement and retention of people, assessing risk as well to the organization, of course, but key business financials and tying that back to what they do.
Mhm.
And I cannot echo or emphasize that enough. It's a challenge, right? It's not easy for RMs to do that. But it's a huge piece of it, right? Because you're talking then about, margin and cost control, revenue confidence, right? And again, to Jen's point, moving utilization conversations more so to what I say, like throughput conversations, right? So we need to think about how much value we can deliver rather than how busy we are.
Mhm.
And I think
Love
this
it.
is where that's this crux of this kind of utilization because ORMs can talk about utilization at length, right? Like it's it's like that thing that we love to talk about and know so much about, which is natural, right? Because we're versed in it. We know it well. We can explore it. We can, get creative with it. But it's really trying to move the conversation beyond that, right? And it's funny because particularly when I think about, SaaS environment or I think about professional services world, there's consistent dialogue around things like time to value, return on investment, and outcomes, or aiming at least to be outcome based. Um, Very rare for RM to actually tap
Mhm.
into that or tap into that more, where they really should.
Mhm.
So I think again, if you want to be maybe a partner to the business, you need to start thinking about that business beyond your perceived scope or what that job description is. Um, Everybody is trying to do more with less, which makes RM really, really important, but also
Mhm.
makes us subject to the same thing.
Mhm.
How do we do more as
Mhm.
RMs?
I love it. So I hear both of you saying resource management is elevating its basically perspective, moving from the tactical operational management side of things to becoming more of a
Mhm.
strategic partner. So I wonder, how can we actually reframe the title? You mentioned the title, right? It doesn't really hold true anymore to call it a scheduler. What would be more appropriate titles, jobs? How can we frame it differently as we're moving into the new year? So, this shift that you beautifully outlined also is reflected in how we call resource managers. Do you have some ideas? Jen, would you like to share some thoughts perhaps? And Gary can build upon it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of I think workforce planning is in that realm. It's not just resource management, it's really planning. Um, and let's see, and then even, yeah, like I think just resource management is too narrow. So yeah, for me, it would be more towards like the workforce planning, workforce optimization, um, and any like operational related. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure Gary has a lot more ideas.
No,
Fantastic.
no, I love it. I mean, because we are doing that, right? You are ultimately trying to optimize as much as possible, whether you think that of that from a tech perspective, from a process perspective, from a talent perspective, right? It is really looking towards that. Um, I certainly can't take credit for it, but I remember not so long ago, someone mentioning revenue assurance, for example. And I think assurance actually, I mean, revenue certainly speaks the language of the business, right? And
Oh,
gets
yes.
attention very, very quickly. But actually, the term assurance, even by itself,
Mhm.
right? So you could have fun with this. You could get creative with this and look towards what is your organization actually trying to achieve, right? And whether
Mhm.
that's already got a resource management office or resource management function, if they don't and you're responsible for building that out, like really listen, hear what the pain points are, where they're trying to go, why, And then, don't want to be too dismissive where you just tack assurance onto the end of it, but you need to think about what that really means.
I love
So
that.
if we said revenue assurance, for example, what does that really mean, right? So get versed in that and quick.
Yeah, amazing. And some of the other job titles we brainstormed in our prep sessions like business partner, strategic advisor, resource experience. I also love that. Utilization officer.
Mm.
So yeah, I think what we landed on jointly was there is a refresh needed. And if you have the chance in your organization to shape this, use it and get creative. That's maybe one of the calls that we would like to share today as a call for action. Amazing. Great way to start the conversation. Thank you both very much. Now, let's have a dive into your unique journeys. I already outlined it briefly, and I want to spend a bit of time really looking at how has your role, the way that you approach resource management, the way that your organization approaches resource management evolved over the past year. I remember one of the check-in words shared was evolution. So how has your resource management landscape evolved this past year? And maybe Gary, would you like to kick us off this time?
Sure. Yeah, look, and I love that word evolution because I think no matter how long you're in the environment or in the field, you're constantly evolving, you're learning something new, right? Or at minimum, you should be. Let's put it that way. But I mean, the domain is evolving. I think part of it is also, how do we evolve the language alongside it, right? And I think we were kind of touching on that somewhat. But look, I mean, I had a significant change of role in the last 12 months. So of course, with a new environment comes new challenges and opportunities. I think my thinking around ORM has certainly shifted with that. So maybe being more, what word would I use? Exploratory.
Mhm,
Um, we already mentioned creative, so both of those together somewhat. So trying to get more depth with solutions that kind of follow systems thinking and definitely focus on kind of first principles thinking. So really what I've been trying to do is kind of aim for simplicity where possible. I find myself asking why a lot. Some of that's because you're new, right? You're trying to understand a
mhm,
different business, of course. Um, but that kind of curiosity is important and challenging maybe what has come before. That's where why creeps in too.
mhm.
And a series of whys, not just the one, right? The kind of five whys.
Yeah.
Um, so and just engaging more with AI as well. But a lot of what I find goes back to what I said earlier on, like financials, like what's moving the needle. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, I say financials because I lean a bit more heavily that way, but I mean, it doesn't have to be quantitative. It can be qualitative as well in terms of personas and experiences and other things of that nature, whether that's on the customer or the employee side. Um, but I find myself having a constant eye on metrics. I always did, but this feels literally like a daily procedure, like in the morning that I'm tracking what's changed, what's happened, right? Um, and mainly as well, I think you know, to see if things are as I think they are. And if they're
Mhm,
not, why?
mhm,
Because a lot of the times, right, some things are obvious. It's like, we're definitely going through more volume right now. And you go in, you check your report, you check your metrics, you check your dashboard, and you're like, yes, the volumes we're seeing is over 50% from what we're used to. Okay. There's a perfect explanation for that. But at other times, those metrics or those KPIs or the things that you're tracking don't always jive. And it's
mhm,
really interesting. It's a steep learning curve, but it's really interesting to dig into that and do a kind of compare and contrast with what you were expecting, what you thought was happening, what you're hearing is happening from other
mhm.
people, and map that out actually tangibly with numbers.
Mm, love it. And also, thank you for sharing the 5 why method. It's one that I appreciate a lot. It's great for exploring and getting
Mm.
the curiosity going. I wonder, as you started into your new role, how did you play around with the whys? Who did you ask? And yeah, maybe do you want to share one or two learnings from the responses?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's when you say five whys, it sounds very, it can be frustrating to be on the receiving end of that. But I mean, when it's done with a with natural kind of human approach to it, right? Like just that, again, that depth, that curiosity to, and desire to go further, right? And we said it earlier on, like go beyond. What does that mean?
Hmm.
It's not just asking the one question and getting the response, but, oh, that's interesting because when you mentioned this, I'm thinking about that. Does that tie in?
Hmm.
And just exploring that with people.
Hmm.
I think for me, landing in a new role in a new company, it was back to basics in turn, rather than, let's say, a road show or taking something out there to showcase it. It was actually more, um, the kicking off of a project, if you will. It was literally having so many conversations across the business and different business units and across the organization. People from customer success, from support, from sales, from systems and reporting. Like the
Hmm.
wider you go in those early conversations, just to get introduced, understand what they do, what they're responsible for, what do they think's working? What do they not think's working? Why? It's amazing what you can learn and so quickly. I think this spins you up so much faster in your role than
Hmm.
any documentation or any video or anything else you're
Hmm.
going to find from a collateral perspective. Let's put it that
Oh,
way.
totally. Yeah, I'm super with you. And also, by doing that, you not only learn heaps, but you also build those connections and you build
Absolutely.
trust, right? Which will help you so much later on.
Absolutely. Spot on.
Yeah, the listening tour. I love it. Thank you very much, Gary, for sharing a bit about your 2025. Now, Jen, can you take us along your journey? Can you share a bit more about what exactly happened early 2025? How have things evolved, and what was your role in it? What did you learn along the way?
Yeah, so for me, using the word evolution again, it's really tied to like growth and complexity and just stepping into a part of the professional services world that I've really never dabbled in. So I've worked in assurance, tax, and advisory before, but this is the first time I've stepped into a client accounting services sector of the, I guess I would say public accounting or professional services world.
Hmm.
So in CAS, and especially with all the M&A went on in 2025 for us. So, um, like you said, it was 13 plus firms coming together as like a national, newly built national public accounting firm. So with the M&A kind of footprint, our resource population really expanded quickly. So then now that we're not just one sort of office or one firm scheduling. Now there's multiple offices, there's onshore, nearshore, offshore. So there's a lot of different components to it at this point. So managing resource management we couldn't really do it the same way as before, uh,
Right.
which was like some when it's smaller, you can kind of rely on like conversations happening, you can kind of memorize
Mhm.
that. But then when it's such a bigger scale, there's just not as much like there's not as much visibility into it.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it became because of that, a lot of things changed for me. So in CAS, especially in CAS, each office at that point came with its own kind of ways of working, its
Hmm.
own tech stacks, kind of different nuances, professional services like depart or I guess I would say different industries that they lead. So this adds really kind of an extra layer to
Yeah.
all the complexity with like two people may have the same title, but very, very different experience, very different delivery strength. They know different techs. So now that we move into more of a continue move into the national structure, one of the most important things that I found is really building kind of a well organized and documented skills database
Hmm.
and really pairing that with kind of visibility into who knows what tools, who knows what systems, and that will help with the staffing capability a lot and not just really who's available, because obviously we know that utilization doesn't always mean or we want to like staff with the right people versus just utilization. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think because of that, my role is definitely less about like single staffing decisions, which comes when it's a smaller size firm. And now it's really advising leadership on what patterns I'm seeing, like what type of projects are trending, what skills, what tech are we keep seeing that we really should investing in terms of skill sets, what new tools are being adopted, and then where we may need to hire, train, or kind of just adjust how we deliver, whether it's just different delivery model, different like yeah, different levels of people
Mhm.
staff onto a single project. So just a lot of playing around um, with kind of how things work. And the goal is really to make staffing more predictable and reduce sort of the fanning out fire, last minute scrambling type of situations. And I think one big thing for me is really the standardization of things is going to be super important going, it's been going coming into 2026. So what intake when like we have intake and consistent, like is consistent, what availability really means for across the offices, how do we hand off, how do we work with other offices, how do we really have staff changes, but be less disruptive for clients and less stressful for teams involved. So yeah, I think for me, I still do a lot of the core, like day-to-day, what you would think resource management work is, but also leaning to kind of the bigger picture. How do we make things easier? How do we make things more re repeatable is a weird word, but more, I guess, repeatable down the road? And then how do we consistently build that forward and scale as we grow into a bigger organization? So yeah, those were really over this past year, a lot of the key takeaways that I've had. So definitely visibility and
Mhm.
also just have clean data would be a great starting point.
Hallelujah and amen.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your fascinating journey in this, yeah, mergers and acquisitions environment where complexity just basically exploded in a very limited amount of time. I already saw that a first question popped into our Q&A, which is awesome. So I just want to invite anyone as you're listening in, feel free to reflect on your own year, any question that popped up, or as you listen to Jen and Gary share about their reflections, if there's something that you're interested in. For example, Gary mentioned systems thinking and how this might be useful for resource management. Capture it in the Q&A so we can make sure we address your questions. Perfect. Let's dive into another interesting reflection. Was there any particular moment or aha realization last year that changed how you think about resource management? So, have a think. Was there any light bulb moment for you? And perhaps, uh, Gary, you can kick us off.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think these things can happen or hopefully are happening on a more regular basis and you haven't had one for the for the year. But given that we're kind of focusing on lessons learned, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of it's funny, right? Because in the space of RM, in this field in particular, there's again regular conversation around um trying to be more proactive rather than reactive, right? And although I've probably articulated that umpteen times in various different places, I think it means you also have to live that. And again, what does that
Right.
mean? It's kind of like, well, stop waiting around.
Hmm.
Being proactive literally means to be proactive. Go do. Assume, let's say, the authority until you're told you don't have it. So, if I think about that and apply that particularly to, at least from my perspective, because it's quite an honest one for me. I mean, I dabbled around with AI, but not half as much as I probably should have. I felt like I was somewhat late to that game. Um, so that was a big one. Stop waiting around for
Mm.
AI to land in your lap because, it might to some degree, right? If you're PSA tool, PPM vendor, whatever, the tech will come to you in some way, shape, or form, but don't be kind of passively waiting for it.
Mhm.
So what did that mean for me? It was getting curious, it was getting hands-on, and it was exploring it, it was failing and failing multiple times, and then exploring again and kind of iterating on it, and just
Yeah.
finding kind of what worked for me, and it's any conversation I have about this, literally only having a conversation this weekend around the same thing. I was talking to someone that I know, and they were like, "Oh no, I'm in ChatGPT and I'm doing this and I'm doing that." And you're like, "Oh, that's very interesting." I was like, "Have you gone to Claude, for example?" No, no, I'm only using ChatGPT. So then it became this conversation. It was very kind of like natural dialogue around this literally on the weekend. So we started talking about like ChatGPT versus Claude versus Gemini versus Copilot. And again, that idea of like stop waiting around, get in there,
Mm.
explore it, take a look at it. If you're very familiar with ChatGPT, then open Claude at the same time and use the same prompt you would have
Mm.
in ChatGPT and just do a compare and contrast. Like just take
Amazing.
some simple things that you do today. And I love the analytics one because ORMs are constantly trying to get better at articulating what they're finding in their metrics. What does this mean on the ground? And so that's a great use case, right? Explore it yourself first. I can't reiterate that enough. What analysis have you done, and what would you say to a stakeholder or an executive about what you've found?
Hmm.
Then drop that into AI and see what that comes back with. Were there any
Hmm.
blind spots for you? Did it notice something you didn't? Is it kind of acting funky where you're like, actually, that's not the number at all, right? But there's all learning in this is the point. So yeah, I think that was a kind of an aha for me, talking about proactivity and
Yes,
kind of
yes.
waiting for things to land in your lap, which doesn't happen.
I love it. And just while we're at the topic of AI, which of course is going to be probably even bigger this year than it already was last year, you also mentioned another great use case in our prep session around documentation. So perhaps can you just share one or two quick thoughts on how
Yeah.
this could be, someone listening today, what could they take away as an actual call to action to be more proactive and explore?
Yeah, that's just speed and efficiency, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, most people are leveraging AI for some form of documentation, but when you start talking about value add activities and the speed with which you can get through something, now I don't think this is a drop it into AI, whatever comes out
Hmm.
gets published, right? It's not that situation, but
Yeah.
when you think about the bulk of the heavy lifting that you would have had to do yourself, that's kind of gone away now, right? Um, and particularly, and whether this is in data analysis or anything you're using AI for, prompt engineering is going to become a big thing. So that's why you want to get your hands dirty. You want to get in there and figure out how do you articulate best what you're trying to achieve, right? And provide context while keeping certain things sensitive, right? Like keeping that,
Yeah.
to yourself. So there's a real balancing act here and a
Hmm.
juggling act that everybody needs to get a bit more, um, I suppose, familiar with, and just for it to become almost automatic for them that they exclude this, but they include this, and they provide more context here, and really help support the output that they're looking for.
Mm, I love it. Yes, Jen, I can see you're ready to jump into.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with everything that Gary's saying. And then for me, I think AI is not like the starting point. It's really you need to have clarity, kind of a clean set of data in order for AI. It's not like AI can fix everything. Um, I think for me, the resource management only really scales when you're very disciplined and really have the basics down. So whether that means consistent like definitions or like documentation process, clean data is super important, clean inputs. Um, so I think if we don't agree on all those things and have all those things set up, then we could end up with a lot of noise. And if you put that into AI, it could just be even noisier. So I think just having clarity is super important in this first step. Um, and then I think the other kind of like reality check, as I mentioned, is like, yes, Excel is definitely still everywhere. Yeah, but I think it highlights kind of a bigger opportunity, right? How do we modernize how we capture all these data in Excel? How do we, whether that's access skills, tech stacks, like staffing signals, and then how do we have the data to be more visible and consistent? And for me, especially, I think where AI has helped me the most is like more practical ways, I would say. So it saves obviously time on all these repetitive work that we have to do, which gives more time into more of the strategic thinking and functions. So for me, I use the really like summarize meetings, even drafting messages, turning just really messy notes into like structured inputs that we could use, doing quick pattern checks even. And then I think the time saving really matters. Because then, yeah, like I said, it lets me spend more time on like the value add work,
Yeah.
interpreting what the data actually means versus doing kind of the busy work of doing of whatever it is that we needed to do beforehand. And then it also helps me with like aligning our stakeholders and kind of just improving our model, operational model in general. So I think for me, I treat like AI more as like a I don't co-pilot, which is funny, but it's a co-pilot, but like to definitely validate everything with real context. And
Mhm.
then the last piece is yeah, I like think like Gary said, like ownership is such a big deal. Like resource management professionals can we can wait to be asked about all these things, but if we're um we can just wait to be asked. We're kind of just sitting in such a unique position where we see
Mhm.
everything. But I feel like if you see a gap in data, if you see a gap in process or communications, you can be the one to take ownership and
Mhm.
really improve that thing. So I think that mindset really shifted for me and made me see kind of how resource management as a platform can really go into a lot of different things. It translates into like we can do a lot of like the operational planning piece, financial side of adjacent thinking, and really just advisory work over time, which really can open a lot more opportunities for resource management as well, when you take out the busy work.
Love it. Yes to everything both of you said. Thank you so much. And maybe just a quick peek into my personal AI favorite hack at the moment. It is to use the microphone function so you can just speak because I'm so much faster at speaking than typing, and it is very forgiving. You can literally just record yourself thinking, and it will structure all of your messy thoughts in a very nice way. So yeah, if you haven't found that icon button, the microphone button, just play with it. Honestly, it's been a game changer within the last few months for me. Awesome. We've got only 20 minutes left, so I really want to make some space for the Q&A now. To everyone listening, we've got a full house, 40 people in the room, which is awesome. So please help me prioritize by upvoting those questions that are most interesting to you. And also, please keep on adding questions. I will kick off with Molly. There is a thumbs up here. And Molly is wondering, how do you recommend managing last minute or unknown requests without the resource function becoming overly reactive? In practice, these can pull focus away from longer term strategic planning. How do you strike the right balance? And I can see Gary already nodding, so perhaps do you want to kick us
No-
off?
Not nodding with an answer, nodding with a great question.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
starting point.
yeah, it's a great no, it really is, Molly. It's a great question. And you're absolutely spot on, right? It's in some cases you'd love to say kind of, and everybody knows the phrase pretty well, like lack of preparation on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. Um, but it's business, right? This is what happens. There's always going to be something that was unforeseen or last minute. How do you maybe control for it? Probably in the same way you do for other things. It depends on the scale, obviously, the churn or the movement of resources, the duration of projects, all of these kind of things, right? But just as a kind of blanket response to that question in particular, what my brain goes to is kind of dedicated pockets of time, if that makes sense, to either handle those situations from an RM perspective. So internally, like how do I free up my RM's capacity to get
Hmm.
taken or overrun with all of these things we need to manage? Um, but equally, you could think about it from particularly from a staffing perspective too. I always like to get back to, particularly when there's issues or customer escalations, these different types of scenarios where you almost have like a risk reserve, like you have a dedicated group of people. They still have their day job, but there's like a group of people you can pull together very, very quickly,
Hmm.
um, like a rapid response team, for example.
Hmm.
Um, and you can do this in different ways. I mean, if we think about managing bench even, some of that could play into it there where you might have a project manager where you're not expecting them to be 100% billable utilized, right? You're keeping over 20 or 30% because they have other things that they need to do. The same can be true of these situations that occur last minute, might require a short response or might need someone to kind of parachute into a project, fix a problem, and step back out again.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm not sure how directly I'm tackling the exact, response maybe Molly wants, but I think it's some of this is discipline as well, right? Again, we can't probably respond that, hey, you didn't plan for it, don't expect me to pick it up immediately. That's just not how business works. You need to have those kind of escalation frameworks there. Um, Preferably documented and agreed with the rest of the business that, hey,
Mm.
these are the situations that do constitute an emergency. And when they happen, you can guarantee that within X SLA, we're going to respond to it. But you're right. I would never let those exceptions overshadow the general rules of engagement that you want within the business.
Mm.
Um, you have to protect that space for the strategy. If you get
Hmm.
overrun with these ad hoc things, you've lost that ability to actually plan for the future and you're just kicking a can down the road. So I love the question though.
Mm. Nice. Thank you so much, Gary, for having a first go at this difficult, challenging question. I wonder, Jen, are there any other thoughts that popped up in your mind? Anything you've seen work well to strike that balance?
I think it goes back to kind of what Gary's saying too, like you need to have common understanding or common ground rules with the leadership team as well. Like what constitutes as an emergency? If it's just because this is, I think, yeah, if it's just because there's like a client came in and they want something done fast because that's their expectation, that may not constitute as an emergency. But if it's, I would say if it's something that um just yeah, I think basically what I think it comes down to is leadership team. You guys really just need to have a common like ground of what constitutes as an emergency
Yeah.
before really doing anything to it. Like we always want to have some type of bench available for these situations. I think having you can't plan around like obviously 100% capacity level. So there's always some sort of a bench for these one-offs. But you obviously don't want these one-offs to become the norm, because
Mm.
then what is the point of a bench? So yeah, I think just really needs to agree upon and then having meetings with people. If there's two projects that needs to be staffed ASAP, you can always get together with the people and kind of talk it out to see what really makes sense. I think conversation is still very important. You can't, there could
Hmm.
be things that we don't see in the background, even though we kind of sit in a seat where we see everything. There could be things in the line that we don't know. So I feel like conversation is very important. And communication, just being really upfront and visible with the challenges and what kind of having alternative options as well. You
Hmm.
can, if option A doesn't work, maybe this option B could work and just work your way around. So I think always having sort of backup options would be
Mm.
ideal.
Yeah, nice. Thanks so much, both of you, and thanks, Molly, for your question. I'm gonna pick the next one, and please keep the questions coming. Next one has 4 votes up. So this is the question. Other than getting more familiar with AI usage, what skills or knowledge areas do you think resource managers should be focusing on learning this year? Great question. I love it. Jen, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. I think really getting familiar with leadership language, I feel like that's
Hmm.
very important. Um, really just, yeah, reframing your conversation and learning that like you can't lead with you shouldn't lead with utilization. It should really be about leadership language is really the delivery risk, the revenue, a piece of it, profitability and margin. Really understanding those words and what that means will help, I feel like, go a long way in the
Yeah,
resource management space.
yeah.
Um,
Get buy-in.
yeah, definitely get the buy-in. So when we start with like utilization, the conversation can kind of get stuck around percentages and like
Hmm.
whatever else is going on. But when you start with kind of the outcome, the revenue piece of it, I think the decision will become more clear. So really just knowing these financial fluency words and like what they actually mean to for your business, especially, um, whether that's like having, yeah, like the right skill sets to deliver a project. Do we have the continuity? Can we kind of protect the client experience to make it
Hmm.
stable? And just, yeah, I think a lot of the financial fluency words will really go a long way.
Yeah, maybe find a nice buddy from the finance team. You can ask silly questions without feeling like you need to be ashamed. That's a great idea. Thank you, Jen. And how about you, Gary? What skills, knowledge areas do you think should be a focus for everyone listening right now for this coming year?
I mean, to be honest, I have to agree with Jen. I don't have something new to add here. I'll just kind of color it a little bit. I mean, we're not talking about becoming a CFO. Unless you
Hmm.
want to, of course, have at it. That's your career trajectory, great. But I think having some level of comfort in the language, to Jen's point, is really, really important to at least at a fundamental level understand why someone's looking at that or why it matters. When you get to the depth or want to go deeper, I think going beyond the language, that's now about really treating your either business unit or the resource management function as your own business, as if
Hmm.
it was an SMB, right? Like you've spun up your own SMB, it's your business, you're responsible for the financials. These things gotta make sense. And it's so funny that we're having this conversation, right? And it obviously does depend on where you are in your RM journey, but it's a curious one that we're talking about it because in a certain sense, if we're disconnected from those things we're talking about, right? The revenue, the margin, the cost control, OpEx, right? If we're outside of that, how on earth are we actually making any staffing decisions? Right. So if you
Hmm.
reverse engineer the question, it becomes kind of quite funny that we're able to make some staffing decisions outside of having those things at our fingertips, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, or at least understanding them. So I think it's really, really important. I think the more you act like this is your own business,
Hmm.
the better you'll be for it, the better your performance will be for it, the better your creativity will be. The way you'll keep your eye on the ball will be quite different, actually. And you'll be a little bit more uh, critical of yourself and the business in itself, right? Because I think we're critical of the business for sure because we see so much and what's not working and there's different challenges and things we need to tackle. But this again gets a bit more reflective. It's, well, what can I control?
Yeah.
If I'm treating it like my business, I can control X, Y, and Z, right? So start moving the needle in that direction then.
Amazing. I love it. And I just want to also give a quick shout out to a webinar we did a while back, which was titled How to Communicate with the C-Suite, what the C-Suite expects from resource managers, where you, Gary, were also one of our panelists, if I remember correctly. So maybe either or team, if you can find it, you can share the link in the chat, which is exactly to both of your points, a very important aspect in order to thrive. Amazing. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you both very much for your takes. I think we can at least tackle one more question. So I'm going to prioritize the one with three thumbs up. What resource management practices had the biggest positive impact over the past year? So here, resource management practices that have served you well. Gary, you're unmuted. Do you want to kick off?
Oh, I should have muted myself now. I put myself in that position. Silly me. I haven't learned a thing. Um, yeah, look, I think it's kind of going to be a funny one because when you ask the question, and I see it's anonymous, so we don't know who's asked the question, but resource management practices get you thinking about more structurally the methodology around resource management. And maybe that's, where someone's looking to go here. I'm going to go the opposite direction. And for a good reason, though, I think. And I'd say, for me at least, it's testing assumptions.
Mm,
Sometimes my own, sometimes colleagues or the business.
love it.
Um, but equally, I think it can be well framed for resource management in and of itself. Testing the assumptions of what do we think people can handle,
Hmm.
whether that's based on capacity, based
Hmm.
on throughput, based on utilization, based on capability, and then equally the same thing for the RM organization. If you've got a
Hmm.
resource management office, testing the assumptions around that.
Mm,
What
mm.
does that mean? What can it do? What is it saying it can do today? Why it can't take on this other piece of work, right? And really, again, align to the value add.
I love it. And I think I can hear clearly, your experience of last year coming through because you had the very nice position of coming into an existing organization with a fresh pair of eyes,
Mm.
which is awesome to challenge the status quo. And I think sometimes when we're inside an organization for a long time, we forget to challenge things because we're so familiar with them. So I think taking that spirit into 2026 is super, super valuable. So thank you for highlighting that. How can we uh, perhaps take a step back at the systems and environments we're currently in and really uh, kind of synthesize what assumptions are underneath what we have built and how could we test if they're still true because at one point they might have been, true, but things evolve. This, I think, is the word of the webinar today, evolution, evolving systems. So maybe it's worthwhile to recheck if they're still true. So that's super, super inspiring. Thanks, Gary, for sharing that.
You did, Nora, make me think that, it is funny when you think about tenure or the length of time in a particular organization. I think what you've said is absolutely true. And just a word of caution as well, I suppose, if you are within an organization for a long time and you are good at challenging,
Mhm.
you can become a broken record too. So, there is a balance here as well
Yeah.
between
Mhm.
that kind of challenging status quo, pushing back and kind of trying to make things better versus, how much that's being communicated. And maybe that
Mhm.
comes back or ties back into our proactivity and what we truly own and what we can move the needle on.
Nice. Super agree with you on that. Yeah. Nice, Jen. Any thoughts on resource management practices or not that had the biggest impact this past year for you?
I think the biggest impact for me is really, yeah, like this just having a strong foundation is
Hmm.
probably, I would say, the most important thing. Also, for me, coming kind of into sort of a new position as well,
Yeah.
just really understanding how the business works, what it means, what services we offer, what these services actually like mean for clients, for our staffs, and just I think learning about our services, learning about delivery models, that has been really important because then you can put yourself in their shoes when you're staffing too and when you're making these decisions on how it could impact versus really just seeing everything as a number. I think
Hmm.
while like AI can kind of do the dirty work, a lot of the resource management skill sets or like what we are very I think what we're very valuable in is the communication piece of kind of knowing these people firsthand, knowing sitting here and seeing everything. So I think just having like a very strong foundation and then building up upon that. And then for me, and I think this is less like resource management practice, but I think for me, the biggest one is building a community
Mm.
within the resource management
Oh,
space.
love it. Yes.
Yeah, I think connecting with other resource management professionals, whether it's operational, like wherever you go, whether it's in public accounting and professional services or even in like tech, it's just so many pieces of it. You can compare notes, share what's working. I feel like for sometimes resource management can feel a little bit isolated because you don't
Hmm.
really have like a I feel like a lot of the paths you kind of create for yourself. So just
Mm.
having that community is so important to help you kind of learn faster, stay current with what's going on, and also just avoid having to reinvent the wheels. If something's working, you can always take that and kind of see how it will work for your organization versus coming up with something from scratch. So yeah, I think just having someone to sanity check, kind of find your own space. So that's really in 2025, I think that's what I really focused on is like
Amazing.
found a community, kind of just get in it and start networking. Um, like this Leap webinar, definitely my first
Yes.
time doing this. And
Yes. You're
so
doing
I feel
so
like for me,
wonderful.
this is like a huge step just in my building community thing.
100%. And yeah, I can see some clapping hands here, and I can just, yeah, also share that me and everyone, we're so grateful you're doing this and sharing from, really a place of good intentions and experience. So yeah, I think you nailed it absolutely. Leap Webinar is one, a step to building a community. So I think speaking for the three of us, feel free to connect to us. Let's really create strong connections within this group of resource management enthusiasts. And the more we can help each other, the more we can help the resource management function get stronger and become more relevant inside the organization. And I think it will be a fantastic year if we continue on that path. So, beautiful final words, Jen. Thank you for leaving us on this very positive, good note of community. I would like to quickly share with you an outlook for next month. Our webinar in February is going to focus on roadblocks to setting up a resource management function. So, on the 10th of February, same time as today, we're going to have Suzanne Finger and Rashonda Gibson from Point Click Care, and they're going to take us on their journeys. Suzanne built the resource management function at Point Click Care. Rashonda already built it in multiple organizations. So yeah, feel very warmly invited to follow us along in February as we continue to grow our community practice. And with that, I really want to thank you both so much and warmly for coming onto stage. Jen, another big round of applause to you for being so brave after joining a few webinars as an audience member, coming on stage. It's been such a pleasure. And Gary, I have no words to thank you. You're a fantastic partner, and yeah, we really want to thank both of you so much for sharing everything so generously. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I hope you have a fantastic start to the new year. Perhaps yeah, let us know what you have been taking away on social media, on LinkedIn. Let us know what resonated, what you will try out, what you will experiment with. And with that, yeah, a happy new year and see you very soon.